5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It's how I roll, a shooting star in a film noir. I'm floating around 10 feet on the ground. I'm floating around 10 feet on the ground.
Hello, hello, hello. How are you folks? Techno Idiot strikes again here. I apologize for the misstart, but it is what it is. We're going to move forward with part 2 of our show as soon as I make some adjustments here. Welcome to Grasping Sasquatch, Stories in Science. I'm Dr. John Baranchuk, coming at you. Having some difficulties with my screen to start. Getting the head cut off look. Let's see. Not sure why that is. There we go. That's better. So, I am John Baranchuk. This is Grasping Sasquatch Stories in Science. Today, we're going to be, now that we've dealt with Mr. Techno Idiot Problems, which is me, we're going to be moving further forward with the Project X study. In our last episode, we went over some technical terms and gave you an overview of the study and what they went through to develop the tag. We're going to do a quick run through on that for anybody new to the topic today. And we'll wrap up discussing the methodology, the results, the findings, and implications thereof. As always, if you have questions, put them in caps. If you want to talk amongst yourselves, small letters. Please hit subscribe, like, all those good things. That helps us very much. That helps me very much. I want to thank you all for, again, allowing me to share your afternoon here. I see some people have been experiencing the eclipse. That's great. I personally have not, but that's okay. And I hope you enjoy it. If you do, be careful with your eyes. Gonna say hello to some folks real quick. Kevin Harder, thank you for coming again, bud. Appreciate it. Air Force One, nice to see you again. Paranormal Biblical Realm, honored to have you. I think I said Kevin already. Kevin Harder, Sharon, Jennifer Arnold, Eric Sell. Thank you all for attending regularly. I appreciate you all. And I hope you keep learning stuff as I try and bring out stuff for people to learn. So, real briefly, that's what the tag looked like. We're not going to go over the key terms, but I am going to highlight concurrent validity, using a validity measure on your dependent variable, Bigfoot in this case. At the same time, you're using your independent variable, the variable you're trying to manipulate. Criterion validity, comparing your validity to other known objects or things associated with Bigfoot. Convergent validity, having some data that helps prove it's Bigfoot. That's convergent validity. Divergent validity is getting data that points in the opposite direction in Bigfoot, which, if you're trying to separate Bigfoot from human, you want both convergent and divergent validity. Reliability, Occam's razor. Parsimony doesn't always work with something as complex as Bigfoot. The normal curve, I'm not going to go over this again, but we're going to be getting into this in upcoming shows. It's called the bell-shaped curve. As you can see, it looks like the top of a bell. This is the basic foundation for statistical analysis, and we'll be covering this in more depth another time. Talk about Occam's razor. For the rest of the show, I'm using references from the North American Wood Ape Conservancy website and their Tag 7 paper. I think, it's really two studies in one. The first study was developing the tag itself. And we went over this, but they were covering a large area. Develop and deploy a radio telemetry burr tag. This shows you the development of it, the burr, the final burr. They put the burr through alpha and beta testing, meaning they tested the initial version, and when they couldn't get it exactly how they wanted to, they created a second version and retested it. And one of the issues was to get the burr to hold on to hair and not hold on to feathers and fur. So I think it's important to understand that they did a lot of testing to make sure that this would happen. They used different pitches and glues and greases, as well as the burr form itself. I think they ended up settling on rat trap glue being the best. And here are some pictures of it in the fur, actually attached to the fur. And then after they ran the beta testing and felt like it would sufficiently attach, they then tested it again using lengths of artificial hair raccoon hair, hide, natural white-tailed deer hide, hair, Rio Grande wild turkey feathers. And in one sense, the tag itself has become a convergent and divergent measure because they tested it so that it shouldn't hold on to these other animals, raccoon, white-tailed deer, turkey, but it should hold on to a creature with fur or with hair rather than fur. And so in developing this tag, they developed it in a way that they could argue it represents a control measure to ensure that they only catch a creature with hair, not fur or feathers or other tactics in that. And that's going to become important later on down in the study when we talk about it a little bit further. Again, when they tested it against all those other hair samples and fur samples, it worked the way they wanted them to be developed. So in March 2015, Mark McClurkin directed a series of trials to devise a method for radio tag deployment that would enable field teams to capitalize on identified travel lanes of the target species. The basic concept was to incorporate the radio tags into Higgins string traps. The goal was to develop a technique to attach a radio tag to hair, have it stay tagged successfully, and then track whatever they tagged with it. Broader movement patterns look at home range, seasonal variants, hair samples, and even positive identification and specimen procurement, leading to scientific recognition of an advancement as a species of Bigfoot. So he contrived a two-part attachment strategy, one involving the transmitters being attached to a cockleburr and then getting attached to an animal. But then he also used Higgins' technique of deploying black sewing thread at heights of 6 to 8 feet, with one end tied with one end tied and the other wrapped around a limb or a tree on the opposite side of the opening. The purpose of locating the thread at these heights was essential to eliminate the likelihood that species such as flying through just give me a thumbs up that you can once again hear me, so I don't end the stream and start a whole fresh one again. I think I'm back into the one I want it to do, but please give me some kind of signal in comments that that this is working the way it should. Does not seem to be at this second. Oh boy. Audio. Yeah, you can hear me. Recording everything. Okay. I'm back. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that feedback. I lost my slide presentation, so let me get that back. And I lost also a little treat that I was going to share with you, an audio recording. So let me get that back for us. Hmm. Okay. So back to the presentation. So they developed and deployed the the radio telemetry. That was a study in and of itself. We were just about at the point where it was going to show you. Okay, so this is what it looks like hanging. You can see the burr up there with the antenna hanging off of it, but you can't really see any black strings supporting it. So it's kind of invisible. And again, it's at a height that even a bear standing on hind legs isn't likely to get it. Other creatures, maybe a bird, that does look kind of like a spider to me a little bit, and maybe a bird might fly through and get it with its beak. But it's at a height that other animals that might be mistaken for Bigfoot, it can't get attached to. So this is talking, and there it is strung up. You can see the cockle burrs. You can see the string run through it. And here we've got kind of the setup. So the radio tag is glued to the cockle burr, and these radio transmitters, they were associated with a magnet, and when the magnet was pulled loose, that would cause the radio transmitter to commence transmitting. So, the upper range was 13 feet, about 3 inches down below, 6.5 feet from the magnet to the tree, and the rope was approximately 7 foot. So you need a creature coming through there 6'5" to 7 foot to get attached. Now, when it gets attached, the end of the radio tag string is still wrapped up at the top on the left. They've got 10 feet of string laid out on the ground, which is a pointer, points the direction in which the Bigfoot or whatever creature got tagged went. The string that the tag was attached to, it's broken, and the magnet that was attached to the tag to be activated when the tag was pulled off the magnet. Pretty ingenious setup, if you ask me, in my opinion. Again, it would have just been nice to, as long as they were piloting the thing, would have been nice to see if they could pilot it on wild animals in Mother Nature for a bit and then run a statistical analysis. But nonetheless, part of what makes this outstanding to me is the thought and time and ingenuity that went into it, and the fact that they did test it to ensure that an animal with hair would be the one that it would attach to, not animals with fur or feathers or other types of skin covering, if you will. Okay, frozen again. Let's see. Jennifer, I'm going on my end here. Anyone else freezing up? Once the tags were deployed, field protocols had teams conducting scans via an ATS receiver at a minimum of twice a day when in camp. Teams also executed daily visual inspections of each transmitter unit in situ to observe and document any disturbances of the surrounding areas and the radio tag string traps to effect repairs if needed. So they checked them to make sure that they were, okay, they were functioning properly. And they also checked them to make sure that one of the tags didn't get taken. And this was done on a daily basis. Jennifer, I hope if you're still frozen, let me know. I'm not sure if there's anything I can do on my end here. But the tracking technique to be employed by the NAWAC, once a tag became activated and carried by an animal, it is referred to as a discontinuous radio tracking, where a tagged animal is located at random time intervals throughout the study period. In addition to other reasons pertaining to logistics and manpower availability, making regularly scheduled or continuous monitoring regime, the employment of discontinuous radio tracking technique was appropriate for this exercise because any carrier of a radio tag was considered likely to travel long distances quickly, making this technique apropos for calculating the range for the character of a radio tag. And I guess while it's on my mind, I'll bring it up as just something to think of and be aware of. So now, if you've ever had a burr attached to your hair, you know that they could be very itchy, uncomfortable, and they will make you move. And I think one of the studies, or one of the issues with this study, because they found quite a bit of movement on whatever animal they tagged. And I think we need to somehow try and allow for or account for how that movement might in part be driven by the discomfort of having a tag attached to you, how that might affect your movement, distance, speed, rate, things of that nature. Glad you're back in, Jennifer. And they use these location data tracking software. The results. A few activations and downed string tabs had been noted during the week of the 22nd to the 28th of August, 2015. But without any successful radio tag deployments, they couldn't make much of it. So again, the magnet was pulled, but the bird didn't get attached. However, on Friday evening, August 28th at 2050, the field team discovered a visual inspection that radio tag 7 was missing. When the ATS receiver was turned on, it registered a strong signal from the activated tag. So now here they got an animal tagged. The evidence was clear that something had passed through the string and stretched it out to the south. As it turned out upon later inspection, the string had been broken near the tied end. Hampered by nightfall, the team decided to delay pursuit of the tag until the following morning to improve chances of observation and collection. Unfortunately, when the team arose the next morning, the signal from the transmitter could no longer be detected. So they went through all this trouble, got something tagged, and now they can't find it the morning after it attaches. Do you happen to know the estimated time power that was supposed to last in these tags? I don't know what the unofficial estimates was, but they managed to track this animal for 10 continuous months, Jennifer, until they lost the signal the second time, and we're getting into they lost the signal once. The next day it was tagged. All subsequent attempts to restore contact with the missing tag over the next several weeks proved unfruitful, despite search teams hiking an area of several square kilometers within the watershed and adjacent mountains. So they get a tag, they get a strong signal. Next morning, can't find it, no signal. That goes on for weeks. Although many in the organization were convinced that the missing tag had malfunctioned, marine biologist John Perry strongly urged the use of an airborne team to restore contact with the missing tag. At the time, the NAWAC included at least 5 pilots among its membership, but getting a team in the air proved to be a challenge. Issues included obtaining the proper antenna to use with an aircraft, securing access to a suitable aircraft, matching pilot schedules and aircraft availability, coordinating all that with favorable weather conditions provide it to be problematic. The thing that strikes me, and if we've got anybody from NAWAC here, please help me out. As I understood it, with the antenna and the tracker, I believe they had to have line of sight on the creature to be able to pick up the tag signal. And so, to me, if that's the case, it's striking that they were eventually able to acquire the signal again and track it, as I said to Jennifer, for 10 months, but don't show or don't seem to be able to show any video associated with that. So my question would be, if you need line of sight for the receiver to receive the transmission from the transmitter, why couldn't we get any photos of the creature? And that's a genuine question, not a sarcastic one. On December 10th, 2017, Two of the pilots conducted an aerial reconnaissance flight of the study area in search of the activated radio tag 7, constantly scanning the area for contact signals using ATS equipment. After a thorough search over the original valley proved fruitless, the team widened the search to include 2 valleys north of the original activation point, searching elsewhere. At approximately 1400 hours, they began to receive a strong pulse signals from radio tag 7, roughly 5 kilometers northeast of the original string trap site. The airborne team conducted to receive strong pulsing contact signals from the tag as they repeatedly flew in a figure-8 pattern over the contact point, confirming that the signal was indeed radio tag 7. So after all these weeks, they're on it again. In subsequent months, the NAWAC teams documented another 24 contacts with the radio tag 7 signal, as described in Appendix 2. Shortly after the last signal was monitored on the 29th of June 2016, all the radio tags remaining in hand ran out of battery life, as did presumably radio tag 7. The distribution for 25 points where radio tag signals were detected is illustrated in Figure 8. So here we're going to just listen. They're talking about home range calculations using those 25 points to be considered adequate to with a program to estimate their home range. 42.71 miles for the tagged animal using the adaptive kernel method. I'm not going to get into third method. Ranges 9 software, 71.52 miles. So that's quite a bit of variability depending on the method that you used. And this is kind of what they found. They found some areas that were seasonal in the movement of the animal. And I think at this point, we're going to go to this and give a listen.
Where we found the tag.
We have 25 tracking points from that 10-month period.
Over how big of an area did we actually track it?
We employed some range software that helped us to establish.
Yeah, so maybe walk us through that. So the way this would be used in other biology would be that you would take your data points and then you would feed them into software, and then the software spits out an estimate. Is that correct?
Well, there's different kinds of assessments that are used, but yeah, it's essentially correct. You plug in your data, and then depending on the different models, you get these estimates for range.
I see.
So we did establish some home range calculations based on the software that we used. We used 3 different methods. It depended on the different method, but the ranges were anywhere from 20 miles up to 70 miles for a home range estimate.
Are these square miles you're talking?
Yeah.
One of the methods came up with about 70 square miles. But, as far as our calculations were concerned in terms of the species, it was a matter of not just area that was covered, but it was also time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Larger animals are going to have a larger home range. And so, that kind of limited the possibilities, and the fact that the animal was active throughout the winter.
Right.
And the area was so huge.
That's what's interesting to me. We've had this conversation many times while in X, doing our research, like how talking about range and what blew me away is that my assumption was that their range was actually quite small, or that they operated in a relatively small area for all kinds of reasons. I have a lot of reasons why I thought that. But then when we started to get hits like over 2 mountain ranges away, I mean, it just blew me away. The distance, I don't even know about the square miles, but like just as the crow flies, how far this animal was moving north and south, east and west was really incredible.
The tag 7 animal caused us to redefine our concept of what Area X was.
That's right.
Yeah, if in fact we tagged a wood ape, and all of us in this discussion believe it's highly possible that we did, even probable. I guess the thing here is that we don't know what type of individual in any sort of hierarchy. We don't know where this individual stands. We don't know if it's a young male. We don't know if it's an adult female. We don't know if it's an alpha male and there's a troop following him. We just don't know those things. So it's really very general information for us, but I think it's arguably it's better than what we had.
That's a good point. Different types of apes have different types of social groups and social constructs. We have no idea what the social construct of a wood ape would be. It may be the case that some animals are relatively local and don't move, but if you're looking at sort of a gorilla model, there are rogue males that range all over the place. And so potentially we tagged one of those, but to your point, we just don't know.
One thing we do know is that it didn't migrate. It stayed in the same area.
Right.
Not only did it stay in the same area, but it returned to the same area. It was almost like a salmon in that it went in one big circuitous route. The tag was deployed in August, and then all the way around the clock, all the way back into July, it's already almost at the point of origin.
The actual placement of the tag, as I recall from one of the earlier interviews, it was well above the ground. It was above my head height. I'm 6 feet tall. So how high up off the ground was that tag?
7.5 on one end and 7 on the other end.
We spent a lot of time in the group talking about the various candidates of animals that may have tagged themselves with this radio tag. Let's just start walking through the candidates here and why we believe that they're not likely.
Let me just say that there is a possibility that the tag actually could have fallen onto the ground and attached to an animal. So even though the thing was deployed at 7 feet up, I don't think that, in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean that it could not have been some smaller animal that may have been able to somehow get the tag to attach to it down on the ground, or maybe it's hanging. I understand the string was dragged out, pointing in a certain way, but I'm trying to think.
Well, it was broken too, though.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to come from the perspective of the skeptic, because they're going to have all these questions. Well, the tag just fell. I mean, the tag just fell, and a coyote picked it up, or a bobcat picked it up, and that's what they tag, these fools. And they think they've tagged an ape.
But it's a good point. This over 7 feet off the ground, and this string was not just down; it was pulled at that height and hanging in neighboring branches, moving in a certain direction. And the string itself was broken. So something came through it with force. Correct. In my mind, that would eliminate a bird or a bat. I mean, I don't think they have enough mass or power to break that string.
Well, Alton, you're the bird expert. Well, why could this not have been a bird? I know we've already talked about earlier in the show, I think Mark.
Well, I don't think it was a bird because, Mark indicated that this particular adhesive doesn't work particularly well on feathers. But the other thing to consider is that this animal was active at all times of the day, depending on what team was out there. We had hits in the daytime and at night, and late at night. And animals have periods of activity that are pretty typical for them. So that's another reason to rule out bird, because what kind of bird is active at all times of the day?
Right. Besides the fact that it won't stick to feathers based on our testing.
Right. So, it wasn't a bird.
Okay, so bird is highly unlikely. Let's talk about bears.
I think black bear is one of the lowest possibilities on the entire list. And it's generally the first thing that most people think about. Everyone has to be aware that black bears have a denning period in the Ouachita Mountains, and it's strict, and they don't vary from that. And it's from December to March, sometimes even into April. These black bears den up. They stay in this torpor, this hibernation, for several months. There are rare occasions where they may come out for a day or two, depending on how the weather is. If it gets really warm, they may stir around a little bit. And we tracked this thing in December, January, February, March, and April. And it was on the move. It was highly mobile. It was not staying in one position. And in fact, there were a couple of times in February and March where our ground teams were, actually January as well, January, February, and March, where our ground teams knew that the thing was moving, and it was pretty aggressive in how it moved to try to evade their detection.
Because they were tracking it with the receiver. They actually knew the direction it was, and they could see that it was moving. But the interesting thing about bear, that First of all, the bears in the Washitas are descended from northern Minnesota and Manitoba bears. They were brought down there and reintroduced to the region. And so it may not be the case that the weather necessitates hibernation, but those bears, they're sleeping all winter long because that's what they've done forever. The other thing that I would imagine is if it was on a bear and the bear went into his den, we would have lost the tag. He would have been holed up somewhere. We wouldn't have received the hits at all. It just would have disappeared until he came out in the spring.
Yeah, and the bear denning season in the Washitas, Arkansas and Oklahoma, is highly documented.
Right.
There are a number of sources out there, periodicals, scholarly articles that very clearly indicate what is involved in the bear denning season in that region. It's very well documented, and that's just something you can't argue with.
Right. There's quite a bit of research going on in that region about bears. In fact, we've bumped into bear researchers, and over the course of us doing what we do, we've found them doing what they do.
Yeah. Oh, that leads to another idea that disqualifies the bear hypothesis, and that's home range size. There's been a lot of studies done on tagged bears to determine their home range size, and they've learned that in the Washitas, in richer environments, which makes sense, in richer environments, your home range is going to be smaller. And what we're talking about in Area X is extremely rich environment, and to think that a bear would have a 70 square mile home range in such a rich environment doesn't make sense and doesn't go along with what the other studies have come up with.
If you can't wrap your mind around the hypothesis that we tagged in Abe, then it was not a black bear. You have to accept that, I would think.
So
I mean,
if it's not
if you're
a bear,
reasonable.
not a bird, like the only other thing in the air could be a bat. But again, we go to tracking it all times a day, moving all times a day. And I mean, I don't off the top of my head what a bat range is, but I doubt it's 70 square miles.
Bats, yeah, they can, depends on the species, but they can have huge home ranges. But again, in the wintertime, bats are hibernating.
What about the possibility of mountain lions actually climbing up the tree where the string is attached to and dragging it down that way?
This Tag 7 was located practically in camp.
Right.
There's a dense little wooded area between the cabin where we were staying and what we called the South cabin. And it was between those two cabins that this string was attached, was deployed across a path. We had seen the animals there a number of times. It's just a weird thing, but for a mountain lion to come into essentially the middle of camp in the daytime, jump up 7.5 feet, it makes no sense at all.
Or even climb a tree. I mean, the tree that it was in was clearly visible from the cabin. If anyone had been looking, it seems like a very, very unusual activity for a mountain lion to engage in.
Well, let there be no mistake that the home range for the carrier of the tag does fall within the home range profile for the mountain lion.
Right.
But I think there are other factors that serve to disqualify the mountain lion as a realistic candidate. For one thing, it's mostly crepuscular. Also, you have the length of the hair on the mountain lion, smooth and short.
Right.
As Mark McClurkin demonstrated with the tested deer hair. He did not test a mountain lion, but they're very similar. And there was only momentary adhesion to any deer hair. So I just have to think that even if a mountain lion did manage to somehow get itself tagged with our tag 7, that it just wouldn't have stayed on the animal for any length of time, given the shortness of the hair. White-tailed deer, it's another candidate, but their home range is typically pretty small. In southeastern Oklahoma, their home range is normally half mile, a mile tops. And again, testing for tag adhesion to white.
So I'm going to stop there for now and get to Jennifer's question. Do you think that the tracking information could be used to suggest other areas of interest for searching in person? I think one of the things that these guys are impressive in their interpretations, and part of why I think they serve as a good example of how to report and discuss a scientific study, is that they talk about the generalizability and the limits of the animals that it could be, and so on and so forth. They had all three computer generated maps up. I couldn't make heads or tails of the first two, so this is the one I'm sharing with you. But you see that, and this is one thing I didn't understand about what they were saying. They say they don't move far, but yet they have these seasonal movements to different locations within that area. That looks like a pretty good distance to me. But they're hypothesizing movements according to seasons here. And, if you're of the belief that this is an animal, be it doesn't much matter what predator you're tracking, they're going to follow their food source. And so this should correspond, these locations should correspond, Jennifer, to their food sources. And I would think seasonally, and here I'm just deducing, I don't know this for a fact. Um, um, we'd be deducing that they would move with their prey, with their food source. So I think that makes sense. I mean, I'm a fisherman. You got to know where their food source moves at what times of year to be able to catch the fish. I don't see why it wouldn't be any different with tracking or hunting any other species. Having said that, the only words of wisdom beyond that from this study that I can offer up to you, Jennifer, is something I've learned from other Bigfooters. And they will get out a map and they will look for draws, if you know what I mean by a draw, like a valley coming down off the mountain. They will look for draws with a southern exposure. And that's where a lot of folks will begin their hunting, because for the same reason that you put a solar house on a southern exposure, it gets most of the light most of the day. And so you're going to have better warm up, better cooling in a southern exposure. So if I were going into an area totally new to me and wanting to try and put my finger on a good place to start looking for Bigfoot, I would find a map and look for a draw or valley with a southern exposure and start there for where I'm looking, if that makes any sense to you all. Let's see what else we got. They say we should note that the term home range and territory are not synonymous. Territory is defined as the area a species is willing to actively defend against what is perceived as interspecies or intraspecies encroachments, often using signpost or ritualized aggression. So that's their territory. And they're distinguishing that from the home range. Territory is smaller than home range. The home range of a species is the area where the species spends most of its time, but will not necessarily defend. The home range area may well overlap with home ranges of other groups within the species, and in the overlapping areas, the groups will simply avoid each other rather than defend. The NAWAC's range calculation is an estimate of home range, not territory, which is much likely a smaller area, if such exists in the first place, for the tagged individuals. So notice that they're admitting, although they believe they've tagged a Bigfoot, they can't prove it with 100%. They're couching their generalizations with under the supposition that if this was one of the other animals they didn't want to tag, this or this or this would happen. If this was a Bigfoot, they're also limiting the implications of their discussion based on saying we don't know much about this Bigfoot. We're hard pressed to prove that it was a Bigfoot, but assuming it's a Bigfoot, we don't know much about it and therefore how it would behave. So those are kind of cautions against overgeneralizing these results, which I think is good that they make. If this is a rogue male out there just stomping around looking for a fight or looking for a food source, that Sasquatch is going to act differently than a male hunter within the clan, where they go out on a regular basis based on role definition, as some people suggest, and get food for the clan. I don't know if any of that made sense. There is no way to know if the distribution of location data points documented by the NAWAC teams over a 10-month period for the Tag 7 animal are representative of the behavior of other members of the same species. This is just what I was saying. Likewise, even if one of the home range estimates in the present study accurately reflects movement patterns for the tag species, home range estimates in other ecosystems that differ from the Wichita Highlands are likely to vary greatly. So it's hard to generalize for some of these reasons, and they're pointing them out. They're showing that they thought this through, and when they say we possibly tagged a Bigfoot versus probably, that they're showing their logic and reasoning further supports their contention that it very well might have been a Bigfoot. If they had run a detailed study on the Tag 7 development and took hits versus misses from different live animals that they're trying to tag, that would have strengthened the use of that tag as a convergent or a divergent validity technique or validity measure in and of itself. As it is, though, and earlier, well, in my last show, I mentioned another researcher who's really hardcore science, and his main point is they can't prove they tagged a Bigfoot. So their research is pretty much worthless. I'm not sure I agree with that, given all the time and effort they put into developing the tag to ensure that it wouldn't latch on to a bunch of different animals, but would latch on to an animal with fur. However, he makes a valid point in that we're still having to use, as a result, in the first, the tag development, and then in the eventual deployment of the tag, you can see that they're still having to use logic and reasoning to support their points, to support their opinions. Just in many ways, similar to anyone who has an opinion. Now, I don't think it's fair that their opinions are derived in the same way as many other people just come up with opinions, in that they did the research. But with my bias towards experimental science, they did an experiment with the tag but it does not appear that they maintained the statistics for hits and misses with that tag and ran an actual pilot study to show that it tagged creatures with hair more significantly than fur or feathers or other things. And that could, if they had done that kind of pilot study, it could have strengthened their reliance on the behaviors that they observed in the tagged animal as proof that they tagged a Bigfoot. Additionally, once the tag was deployed, please note that what we're really looking at here is we're looking at tracking this animal. There's really not an experimental manipulation once the tag happens. The dependent variable is the movements of the species that they tagged, and the independent variable was the tag itself. But their goal here is tracking it. And for the tracking, they used pre-canned computer range software, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there might have been some other statistical analysis they could have done that would have helped strengthen their findings, in my opinion. Nevertheless, the distribution of contact points over time appear to represent a seasonal pattern where winter observations look to be restricted to areas of dense pine forest. Spring observations were noted in valleys several miles south of the wintering area, a region of mixed pine and deciduous trees, whereas the summer contacts took place in an area dominated by mature mixed deciduous forests. To summarize, over the period of several years and thousands of hours in the field for months on end, animals meeting the description of a very large anthropoid species were visually observed by NAWAC members. Some of the observations took place in specific locations where 7 string traps bearing small radio tag transmitters modified to adhere to hair and fur were subsequently placed in the summer of 2015. The radio tag was activated in late August. The signal was initially very strong, but after the first day, it could not be reacquired for several months. From December through June 16th, 2016, ending when the transmitter died, teams tracked the signal, documenting 25 locations. Signals detected over the mountainous region suggested a home range estimate of upwards of 115 square kilometers, extending over extremely steep, rocky, heavily forested terrain. The fact that the radio tag remained on the animal for 10 months suggests the presence of long hair to become entangled in the modified transmitter, and the broken string supports the hypothesis that the tag creature was very large. Tall enough to breach the string, initially hung more than 7 feet above the ground. So there they're using the height at which the tag was strung to provide validity, further validity that it was likely a Bigfoot based on how high up above it was. That's convergent validity. Teams report that the movements of the signal source indicated that the bearer of the tag was capable of negotiating the challenging terrain and with ease and rapidity, far beyond their opinions and experience what humans were capable of achieving, and that its apparently furtive movements suggested avoiding of encroaching teams. So here we're back into, again, explaining which they need to do, and it's good that they're doing it. But my point is, we need to be looking at hard numbers. We've been explaining and logically reasoning for a long time, 60 years. And if we had more experimental data or other types of data from this study, it would answer a lot of the questions. After due consideration, no candidate of indigenous wildlife, feral species, or domestic livestock appears likely to have been responsible for the observations summarized in this report. So they're saying they think it's Bigfoot, but they can't be scientifically certain. So let's look at some weaknesses, some problems, and solutions. But before we move into that, actually, let me go back to this. Because there was another clip I wanted you guys to hear. I think if I can get it. Guess not.
We would find it laying on the ground. That we would. I'm with you. I mean, everything I know about apes is grooming behavior and all that kind of stuff. I imagine that we would find it, and then that would be great because there would be all this hair stuck to it. For me, that was sort of a best case scenario or most likely scenario.
I had the feeling of just an overwhelming sense of pride of being part of a group that was able to put their minds together and actually get something, an animal, to tag itself, which I don't think has ever been done ever before. And not only that, we very likely tagged a wood ape. That's just historic.
Yeah, I guess there are plenty of people out there that probably would tend to throw water on what we're claiming here, that there's no way they could wrap their mind around it at all. I mean, because for the individual who thinks this thing does not exist, well, it's impossible that we tagged one, right? So we must have tagged something else. Must have been coyote. It must have been a mountain lion. It had to be some other known species because there is no such thing as the wood ape.
So let's start breaking that down. How many teams and over what period of time did
So, and that then speaks, that last line speaks to the major problem with this study. And that is, did they tag a Bigfoot? And of course, that's the big challenge for any researcher out there, trying to prove it's Bigfoot, trying to get something of the creatures or from the creature to definitively link it with the Bigfoot creature as proof. The solution in this situation, I would have thought, would have been very simple. And that would be to add convergent and divergent validity tools. So they knew where they had these things hung up, the tags. They knew the path through which whatever creature they're going to tag would need to pass to catch the tag. Why not employ another device to take the guesswork out of what animal has been tagged. We'll start with the one that's easy to dismiss. Why not deploy a hidden camera focused on that string and that tag? Hide it in the bushes, hide it in the ground facing up. Some video evidence showing the creature actually getting tagged. Well, of course, the answer from most knowledgeable Bigfoot researchers would be, well, they could detect the infrared trigger, and that would scare them away from the tag. And I think that's a reasonable hypothesis, but I also still see a lot of images out there of tree cams, pictures of Bigfoot deployed with infrared. Number one, probably not back in the 15s, 16s when this was being done, but now we have cameras whose triggers are not infrared triggers. So that eliminates the infrared problem being a signal of human presence and discouraging the Bigfoot from coming in and getting tagged. But my point is, or even a long delayed recording camera that can record for 12 hours straight with a battery pack. Putting another device where the tag was and focused on the general area of the tag would have provided evidence that converges on, that further supports this was a Bigfoot getting tagged. Or if it wasn't, then that would be that would be a divergent measure. But I'm not sure that I understand why they didn't at least give that a try. Maybe it was the certainty of the infrared being a deterrent. But some kind of camera trap, in addition to the radio receiver trap in the area, could have provided converging validity that they tagged a Bigfoot. Could have provided that proof, which is the critical weakness of this study. They're back to using logic and reasoning to support why they believe they tagged a Bigfoot, rather than having the hard evidence of it. If you don't want to use photos, how about digging a little hole and planting a recorder, a continuous recorder? Because I imagine once they got tagged, one, walking around the area, you're going to be able to hear footfalls if any communication happens before I just read somebody's comment, Dr. Mitchell's comment, and I lost train of my thought. They could have maybe had a picture of the beast getting tagged, but if you don't want to use video, use audio. I don't know about you, but I've had burrs on me and I move around a lot and make sounds as I'm trying to get the burr off of me. And that's off of pairs of pants, let alone my own hair. So I think if they wanted to stay away from a camera because of infrared triggers, why not just put a long delayed recorder in the area? Again, to act as Dr. Mitchell's calling it discriminant validity, in this case, convergent validity, to show that it was a Bigfoot that was tagged. We have analysis of Bigfoot howls and sounds that show it to be a unique species. What we could have compared that information to the existing information and provided additional evidence rather than logical reasoning that they tagged a Bigfoot. And that would have eliminated, I think, the major problem with this study is just some additional convergent data to help prove that it was Bigfoot, in fact. Another problem with the study, sample size. We've got a sample size of 1 here, folks. Depending on the subject, the human subject, you need hundreds to thousands of people to do human research, and we've got a sample size of 1. Remember from last week's show, the population is all the Bigfoots in the world and their behavior and whatever it is they do. When we're out here in the United States, we're measuring a sample of the Bigfoot population unique to the United States. And there are some suggestions that even within different regions of the United States, when we sample Bigfoot behavior in the South, that is going to be somewhat different than in the Northwest. So, getting a sample size, if we continue to just target an image of Bigfoot, a photo or a video of image of Bigfoot, we're still more likely than not going for a sample size of 1. Maybe if we get lucky, it's a family going through the woods and we may have a sample size of 3 or 4. Okay. But the larger the sample size, the more complicated and more sensitive your statistical tests you can use. But since Bigfoot is so elusive, sample sizes of 1 or 2 are going to be an ongoing problem for anybody trying to sample Bigfoot the creature. So what is the solution to that? Just about every expedition I've been out on, I've run into Bigfoot phenomena, but never Bigfoot in person. So rather than targeting the corpuscular beast of Bigfoot, which is going to limit our sample sizes, we need to continue what we've been doing and get samples of Bigfoot phenomena, prints, casts, audio recordings, the stuff we've been collecting for 60 years that hasn't moved us forward. Part of the reason it's not that it hasn't moved us forward because it's bad evidence. It hasn't moved us forward because of how we treat the evidence. We have not done experiments on this evidence. We have not done statistical analysis of the frequency of these occurrences. These are fundamental studies that need to be done, basic studies that need to be done on Bigfoot phenomena. And the good news is there's a lot more Bigfoot phenomena out there than there are Bigfoots. So my suggestion for this weakness is to stop trying to capture Bigfoot, the beast. Start focusing on experimenting and doing research on the Bigfoot phenomena, because there's going to be more of it available, and it's going to give your statistical analysis more power. Jennifer Arnold, do you know of anyone in the scientific community that has taken this paper seriously, the Tag 7 paper? Well, obviously, yes. The people in the North American Wood Ape Conservancy certainly take it serious. I'm not sure if it was you, Jennifer, or I was talking with somebody else, and they commented that NAWAC did some mass production on this tag and has sold the tag to other research groups to try and replicate the study. And this is just hearsay, but as I understand it, no one else has been able to tag a Bigfoot using that device. And as I understand it as well, no one else, they haven't been able to even replicate that within the NAWAC area X. They haven't been able to tag yet another animal that could be Bigfoot. So I think it has some utility. I think it should be taken seriously because it's one of the initial attempts to really bring systematic study and analysis, um, and some experimental design to the process. Again, we're talking about weaknesses. Every study has strengths and every study has weaknesses. And in fact, when you present a paper, one of the sections of your paper will be a discussion of results in which you discuss the weaknesses of your study and the strengths to make readers aware that you're aware of those weaknesses and you're still coming up with that same conclusion. So, no, I just through the rumor mill, Jennifer, I do know that other groups have been using the tag, but secondhand that no one else has success with it. I you know, it, Bigfoot research has been and is going to continue to be a time consuming and complicated thing. And it's not going to be just as simple as, going out, finding a path and hoping they tag someone, tag a Bigfoot. These guys, before they ever started the systematic research under the NAWAC banner, they were out there as a group and had lots of sightings and learning the routes long before they ever tried to implement this study. So one would also have to ask are other groups not having the success because they're not as familiar with their experimental area as NAWAC is? Well, the fact that NAWAC hasn't tagged any others successfully kind of informs that issue. I think, Obius, if you don't mind, you have to move to a hot spot and live there for months. It takes a long time for them to trust you. Habituation. Yes, they've got to habituate to you and get normal, used to your presence. And I guess one question I would have is, does Bigfoot ever get used to human presence? The third weakness that I see in this study is the experimentation that was done on the development of the tag, which is awesome. They should have treated that even more so like an experiment by keeping hits and misses and do a statistical analysis of the effectiveness of the tag and tagging only something with hair. That would have strengthened the study overall and their argument that they didn't tag another species, that they tagged a Bigfoot. But we've got to shift from just going out and trying to get phenomenological evidence and then say, here we got proof of Bigfoot. We've got to use that phenomenological evidence as either an independent variable or a dependent variable and do experiments that can be statistically analyzed to prove with numbers that this is Bigfoot. So stop looking for the creature, or stop spending so much time looking for the creature. Continue spending more time looking for the phenomena of the creature and start using that in the variables of your experimentation, if that makes any sense. And we kind of touched on this with habituation. There's something called the Hawthorne effect that changes the behavior of what you're studying. They studied a factory's productivity. The productivity went up just because it was studied. Being studied can change the behavior of that of which you're studying. To go to physics here, Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The uncertainty principle, also known as Heisenberg's intermediacy principle, is a fundamental concept in quantum mechanics. It states that there is a limit to the precision with which certain pairs of physical properties, such as position and momentum, can be simultaneously known. In other words, the more accurately one property is measured, the less accurately another property can be known. So you can't measure a molecule's velocity without affecting its position. You can't measure things that are related without affecting the other. And so, this is one why habituation in the environment is important. But I think we also really got to consider, how do we know when they're habituated to us? What's the sign? And how do we know that we're observing their naturalistic or natural behavior when they're around us? Because simply studying them could be changing their behavior. Simply having a burr in your butt is going to change your behavior and how you react to get that burr out and how you move, if that makes sense. The strengths of the study: technical innovation. What they've what they did to develop this burr, and piloting the burr. Again, that's part of it. Alpha and beta testing, and then even more testing. They're doing round the clock systematic procedures, checking their variables. Was a burr released? Was it just separated? What's going on? They've got Area X. That's a lot of square miles with very little human interference. And one of the big controversies on any Bigfoot phenomena is, how do we know it's a Bigfoot made it rather than a human? Already in one show, I outlined a study on structures and how you could separate the structures being constructed by Bigfoots versus humans. But you've got to have a good area for Bigfoots, and you got to have a good area for the presence of humans. If this was a Bigfoot, the tracking and territorial um, implications that we've discussed already. They use statistical analysis interpretations of the data through the range programs, and they allowed those statistical analysis to interpret their data. Let the numbers speak until we start running experiments and reducing our data down to numbers that can be analyzed. We're just using our own logic, which has a strong chance of being biased. You'll note as we listened, they were tentative. They spoke with the weaknesses of the study as well as their hypothesis based on their experimental design limitations. This is what goes into a paper that's submitted for a journal, and they continue to refine their approach. And these are the strengths that I see. I think it's an awesome effort. Comments, questions, or thoughts at an hour and a half? How about that? I haven't seen Craig in here. I'm going to occasionally have Craig in, and he's going to kind of keep track of things that people seem to understand about what I'm saying and what they don't seem to understand about what I'm saying. And we're going to occasionally have a little question and answer feature to further clarify things people might understand. But at this point, we've got some time if you have questions. I don't know if this is Obelus asking me or anyone else in the group a question. I'm new here. Have you seen them? I have seen eye glow of juveniles and infants in mass, but it was at night, so all I could experience was the height of the eye glow, the size of the orbs of the eyes. I could not see their fur. So I have not had a Class A experience. I've been growled at by them. I've been whistled at by them. I've been depth charged. Jeez, not depth charged. Bluff charged by them. I have some harrowing Class B experiences, but no, I have not seen them where I can say that's a Bigfoot in the daytime. But I do believe some people here have. And yeah, my eye shine, I would call my eye shine experience an eye glow experience because it seemed to be projecting its or somehow had a source of light that was brighter than you would expect from reflections. Other thoughts or questions, folks? After tonight, we're going to move on from the Tag 7 study. But I think the North American Wood Ape Conservancy should be congratulated for this study, the systematic approach they used for it. They don't need to do too much to tweak it. Rather than relying on logic and reasoning as convergent validity, throw in some convergent validity measures. Miniature camera that runs continuously for a 12-hour period. Miniature recorder that can run for weeks. Get some other evidence that's happening at the same time as the animal's getting tagged to better inform what species you're tagging, I think is the most important thing that needs to happen with that study. Yeah, different creatures have different colors of eye shine, for sure. One of the things I just learned from a fellow hardcore scientist type that I didn't know is that owls can project red eye shine. I did not know that. I wasn't aware. If anybody knows any other animals in the North American wilderness that has red eye shine, that would probably be very important for us to know as researchers. Obelus making another good point. Woodnocks. Are they woodnocks? Are they chestnuts? Who knows? My buddy Craig and I are getting ready to try and implement one of my woodnock studies here in the next few weeks. Thank you, Obelus. Otters, rabbits. Other comments or thoughts, folks? Jennifer, it was just still so difficult to get the one tagged. It could be a very long time before they're able to tag another. Yeah. You know, and I haven't done my show on intelligence. I'm not sure how intelligent these creatures are versus how instinctual these creatures are. But be it an instinct, conditioning, learning, one time associative learning, you know, if they have intelligence that they can communicate to other members of the species, you know, who's not to say the word's gotten spread? That may seem, and in fact, even in saying it, that seems kind of far-fetched. But then you get into, are they telepathic, and could they be communicating across distances? And again, all those are just hypotheses that need to be studied. And Obelus, I'm not trying to disrespect your opinion. Very intelligent. They have language. They have historically have traded with the First Nations people. I've heard all those things. On one level, I believe in all those things, but on another level, until we can scientifically prove it, I'm reluctant to dwell on it too much, because what we're doing is we're grasping ideas of the creature that appeal to us and holding on to those. That's why I think experimentation is so important, to provide objective data. Well, Eric, thanks for cheering on the crowd. Guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time listening to me drone on endlessly. But I think we're going to get out of here a little early today and call this one done. I haven't thought far enough ahead to know what next week's show will be, but I will undoubtedly come up with something from my book and try and make it interesting for you. Again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your intelligence, the questions, just taking your time to listen to somebody putting out something different about Bigfoot in and of itself is quite an achievement for you all. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you all. And I hope to see you next week. As is always, please remember to keep your mind open, your boots on the ground, and your heart with your higher power. God bless you. See you next week.
I see you running out of reason. Don't try to blame it on the seasons. Why you wanna walk away? When we began, swear we had something that would last. Baby, has the feeling passed? Falling in was easy. How do I make it stay? I will never let go of you. Tried and true. Oh, I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Was I a fool? I know sometimes I may wonder, but I would never leave asunder a thing as good as what we have. Is it a rule? What's good is worth the fighting. There ain't no denying that you and I were made to last. Falling in was easy. How can we make it stay? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. I will never let go of you. Tried and true. I will never let go of you. Tried and true. I will never let go of you. Tried and Have you had a change of heart? Can we go back to the start? I will never let go of you. Tried and true. I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Tried and true.
Wanna do it all with you by my side. If you're in, meet me here tonight. Be brave and come along. I'll be alright. Promise we don't need no break.